We're live.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Inside Movies Galore, where we are starting another themed month here. I think we're returning to a theme that we've done before, where we are doing films that are accidentally scary. And the first film is one of my picks that ended up being voted in. And it is a film that was filmed in the year that I was born, 1984. And it was directed by Wolfgang Peterson, a German director. It is also a German production. And it stars Noah Hathaway, Barrett Oliver, Tammy Stronach, among others. But let me just say what IMDb says about the film before we go into our first impressions here. A troubled boy dives into a wondrous fantasy world through the pages of a mysterious book. So, I'm going to go with you, Dustin. What was your first... was this a first-time watch for you?
Oh, of course not. So I don't even remember when I first saw this. I saw this pretty young. And this is such a great fantasy movie. Like, I love this movie. It's kind of hard to describe what about it makes it work so well. Everything about it just feels like it fits together. It's a fun adventure, and it really draws emotions out of you that you wouldn't expect it to. It has this really sad scene that everybody remembers, and it's like, wow, I didn't expect to feel that here. Well, I'm sure we're gonna discuss it, of course. So I didn't want to go too far into it right now, but I just love this movie. It's so good, and it's such a meaty fantasy, which is kind of surprising because the story is very straightforward and even a little bit nondescript. It's kind of non-specific in its own way, just because of the nature of the plot line. It's very clever in how it kind of describes the nature of imagination itself. If that doesn't sound too lofty, you know what I mean?
No, definitely not.
It's just great. I love this.
I do want to say before we move any further is that it was written by Michael Ende, who was a German author, and that might be kind of why this film has some German origins behind it. So going over to Tammy, was this a first time watch for you?
No, definitely not. This is another one of those. My dad showed me it. um, my first impression, I guess, was when I was very young too. When I, probably preteen or whatever when I saw it, and I just thought it was wonderful. I mean the whole the fantasy and the storyline, and it just, even for somebody that was like a preteen, it didn't seem like it was a kids movie. It was something that I thought that I enjoyed very much, because at the time I watched it, I had recently become aware of a younger brother and sister, so of course they loved it.
Okay. Is that the end of your first impression then?
Yes, for the moment.
Okay. Going over to you, Jake. Was this a first time watch for you?
Oh man, for a minute there, I was kind of hoping you'd build up to it so I could dash everyone's hopes all to the ground. I have an unusual relationship with this film. I know I saw it years ago. I know I saw it. And I'm quite reasonably sure I saw the second one as well. But it's been years since I've seen them. And I couldn't tell you if I even saw them more than once. I've always had sort of a warm spot in my heart for this franchise. I've always remembered Falcor, not by name, but I definitely the image of the character. And the kid flying atop the dragon. Everyone remembers that image. And the image of the childlike empress. But when it comes to, I think Dustin hit the nail on the head. The story is nondescript. It's, when I went to watch it this time, it slipped right by me. Almost nothing stuck. The most notable thing about it was how terribly over top both of the male actors were. And how deeply cruel Gerald McRaney's character was. And, all the certain little negative things were the only things that really stuck out to me on this viewing. So this is definitely one that I could see if I had seen it a few more times as a child. I'd probably have a warm nostalgia for it. But as it was, I have that little bit of nostalgia. But this viewing is, again, the first one in probably 30 years. It just kind of left me going, was that all?
How dare you, sir?
Well, the one thing you have to remember is that the book is actually done in like two different parts, and for the most part, the sequel to this film actually does kind of take care of that second half of the book. To be honest, so technically, you're actually getting only half of the novel in this first film.
From what I understand,
that you're aware.
Well, from what I understand, because I did read a lot up on this, from what I understand, you're getting a lot less than that. Apparently, Michael Ende hated the movie and thought it did a terrible injustice to his book. But I did want to rewatch the second one, but it just the stars did not align. I own a copy. I just could not watch it this time around. That might have helped fill in the holes a little bit. It is the main thing for me, honestly, the main reason this one stuck in my mind, though, and it's sort of like a little bit of a flippant thing, but it's interesting that it's called The Neverending Story, and both movies are an hour and a half long. It's like, you think
false advertising.
I know. You think The Neverending Story, you'd think it'd be something like The Irishman or Zack Snyder's Justice League.
A 90-minute clip after the second one, they felt never-ending.
I thought you were gonna be like, I couldn't wait for it. I thought you were gonna make like one of those like guys from the Muppets jokes, yo.
Yeah.
I was relieved when it ended. I thought you were gonna do one of those, and I was gonna be mad at you.
If I could possibly watch a cut of this with the two of them watching it MST3K style, I would love that. That could be like a bonus feature on the Criterion edition or something.
Yeah, what happened to the Muppets? Like, they could totally do that. They're just films that they own the rights to. Just get Statler and Waldorf to riff the whole movie. That would be awesome. That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, like I said,
this is a good movie, though.
Well, but they could do it with good movies too. Well, like good Disney movies, and this is not a Disney movie, but like just that idea is a good one. But yeah,
continue, Jake.
Going over to you, Dane. Was this a first time watch for you?
No, it was not. I saw this film for the first time in college when I was watching a lot of dark fantasy films and kind of catching up on children's films that I hadn't watched when I was a kid, that kind of stuff. And I like this film, definitely. I like the fact that, you do ever so often get a select few films that are these big budgeted fantasy or sci-fi films that are not really American in the classical sense. Now, this was partially American production, but also partially a West German production, and obviously Wolfgang Peterson, luminary director of what was then West Germany at the time, having done Das Boot, and if I recall, also doing Air Force One later. Both incredible films, very different from this, but incredible in their own way. And this film, I like that it has a slightly different look than what you might see in a conventional children's fantasy film or dark fantasy film of the period, although it certainly would fit alongside, something like Labyrinth or The Dark Crystal without directly copying either. And I enjoyed the film. I can kind of see what Jake is saying as far as like the story is very deliberately, I would say, kind of um well, we said nondescript,
Vague.
but I would say I don't think nondescript is the right word. I would say kind of abstract is probably the best way to say it.
Okay.
It's a very talky film. That's one thing that I noticed about it, is that it's dealing with predominantly with emotions and concepts, which is a neat thing for a children's film to do. But it does result in a lot of really cool looking scenery and effects and settings for the time, not as much in the way of action. And that is not a bad thing, it's just an observation. um, and I do think that the weight of the ideas that they talk about are really they're really good and challenging for kids, because it is about imagination and joy versus despair and nothingness, which can obviously come about with the death of a parent, which is what Bastion deals with, and just something that I think adults deal with. I know I've definitely dealt with that in my adult life, just those feelings of despair and kind of the death of dreams and that kind of stuff. Some of those kind of existential threats. And I think for the most part, it does manage to visualize a story that is otherwise very internal. So that part's good. I do think that I think about this alongside something like Return to Oz, and I think it's funny that this film is much better reviewed than Return to Oz was, although I think Return to Oz just does it for me a little bit more. I think it's a little bit harder core, but it also has a sweeter payoff in its own way. This one does have the amazing score, though. I forgot about the fact that Giorgio Moroder was involved, partially with the music, and you cannot have an
Yeah.
'80s, and you can't think of the '80s musically and not cinematically and musically and not think of Giorgio Moroder, because he was like everywhere, and for good reason, because he was awesome. But
I did need to give the movie props for the music. I'll say that. There's some
yeah,
solid music.
definitely. But yeah, I think I can see why it's really beloved. I love the themes of it. I love that it tries to cover mature themes in a fantasy setting for children. I don't think it's necessarily the most action oriented, because like even something like Peter Pan covers off themes of mortality and happiness being a state of mind, that kind of stuff. It covers off those themes while still having a little bit more in the way of like action beats and that kind of stuff. And again, I like the more weighty themes in this, and the fact that it does take them seriously. But like, I do kind of there were a few little funny adult things that I was like something that the adult mind thinks about when I was watching this again. I'm like, so the kid is just kind of in this room all day, reading this book, and the hours go by, and it's like, are people not looking for him? you know, and just some of those little things like that are also like, the fact that Artex sinks in the swamp, and it's like he's a horse. What does he have to be all that sad about? But those are more just those adult nitpicky things, because animals can feel sadness too, obviously. But and it is ultimately metaphorical story about, a child going through depression for the loss of a parent. But no, I think it definitely deserves the praise that it gets.
Okay. Going over to you, Kroll. Was this a first time watch for you?
No, I watched it when I was a kid. I was 11 when it came out. Don't remember where I saw it, but I know I saw it when it came out. So I'm pretty sure, I saw it a couple times as a kid, and then I haven't seen it for many years, and I remember loving the movie. Of course, my memory thinks that, when I watch the movie, it's like watching it for the first time, with a few exceptions, like the kid on the dragon. You always remember that. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. I think I liked it a little more as a kid, but I still enjoyed it as an adult. This and The Last Starfighter were two of my favorite movies as a kid. Of course, besides Star Wars. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thought it was fun. Definitely could have been longer. It was long for me because I kept having to pause it. So I was like, it's a never-ending story. Because I had to keep pausing it only. But yeah, it was fun. Pretty much my first impressions on it.
Okay. Going over to you, Mo. Was this a first time watch for you? Mo, you're muted.
Nah,
so you know.
dude. This is one that I saw many times growing up. It was a staple of my childhood, pretty much. I think really my true appreciation. I mean, a lot of other people have said the other shit that I would have said, but they already said it. So we're just going to move on into my newer appreciation for the film. Really is kind of one of those ones that, if you're in like a fever state with like being at home with the flu kind of thing, Neverending Story is one of the best movies to watch because it is kind of vague on the details at certain points. So you just are sort of there like, I have like 103 fever. None of this makes sense, but I guess, you know what I mean? The movie just flows and you're able to sort of hope that your cold medicine breaks your fever and you start to feel normal by the end, I've watched it many times, like home with the flu, and that's where it shines, I think, because it's one of those movies you don't have to think too much about, but you still get that vibe like you're watching Lord of the Rings or something. Yeah.
So it's a fever dream movie for you?
Yeah, pretty much. That's one of the main uses. Like if I'm sick, Neverending Story is one of those movies I immediately put on because.
I ask because when I think of fever dream movie for kids, I think of like the original animated Alice in Wonderland or something really like batshit insane, which is not to say this is more like a calming kind of, I think of this as a lot more calming than that, but
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a nice movie. I'm not trying to be all fucked up during my fever dream.
So a nice fever dream, a pleasant
trying to have
one.
a nice passive, like never ending story, like one of those types of trips, not like some bad shit.
Definitely
also,
a good
fun
trip.
fact, random story, but for some reason we knew this dude like through the retro gaming groups who was traumatized by Neverending Story or something like that. And I didn't think he was serious about it at first, but he eventually left our group because we kept singing the Neverending Story like theme to him. And this was long before that Stranger Things season. Yeah. In hindsight, I feel like that was kind of fucked up. But at the same time, it's such a weird thing to be like mad about. So how can you expect people to not sing it to you? Yeah. Still don't know what was up with that because the dude, like I said, he left our group. But yeah.
Yeah, well,
Well,
Apparently,
the
the
theme-
Neverending Story theme song is enough to trigger some people to take off because I don't even want
Well-
to think about what that entails.
Mhm.
Good.
I mean, the theme this month is unintentionally scary, so it would make sense that some people would have a negative reaction.
Dude,
Although,
this is
yeah,
the
it is
scariest
interesting.
Accidentally
episode.
scary is what I'm wondering.
Yeah.
We didn't do it to him that many times. It was like 2 or 3 times that we started singing the song, and on the third time he just bounced. And fair enough, I guess.
I had a coworker who said she was traumatized by the whistling tune from M, and so I kind of tweaked her on that a couple of times. But I could see how if you were genuinely traumatized, you probably wouldn't want, but so many times for that to happen.
Sure.
Is that the end of your first impression then?
Yeah, dude. I mean, apparently some people are triggered by the Neverending Story song, so just be careful.
Okay. Heading over to you, Brandon. What was this a first time watch for you?
Oh no, I watched this a lot growing up. Mo actually struck a chord when he was talking about it, because a lot of times I would pair this one with Princess Bride if I was feeling ill and recovering.
Good
But I
call.
also used to pair this a lot with films such as Dark Crystal, and I want to say there was another one. Oh, and Labyrinth. I don't know why, but I used to like to pair it with those as well.
Good double features.
So it's a fun movie. I really enjoyed it. As far as the fantasy aspects went with it, I liked the general cloud formations at the beginning. Every time I see that and hear that theme, it brings back a lot of memories for me. And I can see why this was chosen for Accidentally Scary. It wasn't my choice, but I could see several things. I mean, there's the obvious, but there are a couple other areas of it too. I never thought about the song scaring somebody, but it's associations. But there are definitely areas of this film that can be scary or upsetting to children. I know that I always used to get upset at a certain part, which I know we'll cover. But still, great film. Seen it many, many, many times. Watched it this time as I was having my little melancholy moment, putting away the Christmas decorations for the year. But it was good. It was good to have on in the background as I was taking down the tree and cleaning up the movie room's Christmas stuff.
And myself, I am not sure exactly when I first saw this film. I know that it was taped along with many of the other things that my mom taped for me to keep, I guess, me entertained. But this was one that I constantly watched and repeated at least a viewing of it at least twice a year since childhood. And that is probably because it is one of my favorites. And if I think about like all the different fantasy films that I have seen, this is my number one, at least as far as fantasy films. Now or ever, I guess. I mean, I guess I would put Dragonheart right next to it. Because that one was one that I put on repeat for a long time.
Still makes me cry too.
But Neverending Story just hits a lot of chords with me. Maybe it's because I before I collected movies, I collected books, and books were my passion for the longest time. And the fact that everyone around me seemed like they didn't like to read or didn't know how to read or like while I was growing up just made me sad. And every time I saw this movie, it reminded me that there was a world that if we use our imaginations, we can imagine whatever the fuck we want, you know, and it's it hits a lot of chords with me on all levels, and I think this film is the strongest fantasy film, to be honest. So, and I know that there are several, you know, fantasy films out there that a lot of people seem to generate towards, but this one, I know that that some of the characters look a little hokey now as an adult, but I do think that this story is one that resonates, and I guess we can move forward from here.
Well,
So
it does directly. I mean, to further your point there, it does directly deal with what fantasy even is and why it exists. You know, because oftentimes it's to explain things about the human experience or our world that we can't otherwise explain. And so, in that respect, it's a very explicitly fantastical story in the most literal sense. And that's why it's dealing with fantasy fiction itself.
And that's what makes it so clever. I mean, I think that's why I like it so much.
Yeah. Well, that's like when I did Oztober, I did a review of a movie called Ozland, which is this post-apocalyptic film where characters that are wandering around the landscape, they uncover a copy of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum, and one of the characters thinks that these events literally did happen. He wants to believe it so badly because of it, how else would it? You know, he's trying to find meaning in this world that just doesn't have any left, and so the fiction becomes like a shared story that tries to explain his circumstances. And so, in this respect, it's like that, but it's also a story that is directly affected by Bastian's actions and the act of him reading the story.
well, let's start with the plot line then, at least with the beginning scenes, at least up until the point we hit the fantasy section of the film, because it's kind of done in like 3 acts or so. Because the first act is we get to meet him and his father and their relationship. He obviously wants him to grow up in a time where we get the sense that he's lost his mother, and fairly recently. You know, it's not long after his mother's death, I don't think. And he's a boy of 10 years old, you know. So he's got to go to school, and he's got responsibility to take care of. But while he's on his way to school, he gets bullied by 3 bullies that seem to just are terrible to him, and they run him into a garbage can. And well, what do we think about these beginning scenes and Bastian as a character?
In the beginning, it is always dark. But yeah, that to me, it always spoke volumes. I was bullied a lot as a child, so I mean, a number of us, I'm sure, have experienced it one way or the other. And to me, it's you know, you want to get away from them and you want to one up them if you can. And I did think that was a great way of funneling the plot forward. And there's a lot of subtleties that they throw out there with the plot in the background, with that conversation between him and his father that I didn't catch the very first time around. And I admit the VHS I had watched as a kid kind of scrambled around the part where he's talking to his father, so I never got the full conversation until I watched the DVD years later. But it was pretty. I mean, it's pretty good to be able to get that basic exposition. You know, knowing that the mother is passed and that he's having these issues with daydreaming and drawing horses. Wait, no, not horses, unicorns.
Unicorns. Well, no, nothing. No, I have to say, for me, it's interesting because I've seen Gerald McRaney in a few things, and he's usually like this really nice guy. You know, he tends to be like the positive father figure. And here he's just a ass. Like, you know, the way he talks about the mother, I don't know if it's a recent passing or not. I think that's left kind of open-ended. I could be wrong on that, but the way he talks about her, it's like he didn't care about her at all. And I'm thinking this guy, he's telling his son basically that you need to be a cold, heartless prick too, even though you're still a kid. You need to be a cold, heartless prick who doesn't use his mind or imagination for anything other than math. And I mean, that's just a horrible, horrible lesson to teach your kids. And then he rushes off and leaves a raw egg in the blender. Like I guess was Bastian expected to do the dishes? Otherwise, that's a pretty nasty thing to come home to.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean,
you do have to be kind of heartless to be good at math.
I like the fact that the dad, like, he's telling him this stuff, you know, and it's all very kind of on paper, you know, very fine things to say as far as, like, you know, that he should be turning in his homework on time and all that stuff. But the way he's doing it is so just soulless and so detached, you know, and he's not even really paying attention to him all that much. And
exactly.
He's like, okay, gotta go, bye, you know, which I found kind of funny.
I'm reminded of the phrase, you know, or the maximum, I guess you could say, that when I was a child, I walked as a child, I spoke as a child. When I became an adult, I put away childish things. And I feel like that is probably a maxim this guy lives by. But again, he's expecting his 10-year-old son to do it. And that's like,
to me, he was barely a presence in the movie. He didn't hold my attention very long. He just kind of like, this guy's like, you gotta go. I know it's hard that your mother died. You know, just yesterday she passed, but we just gotta get up and move.
These things happen.
He's probably like a banker or something.
Right, that makes sense.
Well, as we move forward, he is.
It was actually a dumpster that they dumped him in, not just a trash can.
Yeah,
if you wanted to point that out. I thought the bullying scene was you know, typical bullying scene, and I gotta say, if you weren't bullied, you were probably the bully.
They were some persistent bullies, though.
So here's a random coincidence. This was 1984. Character goes in the dumpster. Movie released by Warner Brothers. Same year as Purple Rain, where Morris Day puts the one girl in the dumpster. Also released by Warner Brothers in the same year. It's like, that must have just been the year for dumpsters at Warner Brothers, I guess.
What was that stuff that was on his head? Was it like packing, like shredded packing paper or something?
I thought it was like spaghetti or something.
It looked like straw to me.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Straw. And I was thinking he lucked out if it was like straw or confetti or something. He lucked out. He could have been a much worse dumpster.
Well, and when he came back out, the bullies were still standing there, and they're like, "Hey, did we give you permission to get out of there?" So he ends up running down the block and running inside this old bookstore where we meet Mr. Coriander, if I remember correctly, who is he's kind of a main character in the story in the book. But we get this scene where he basically asks him why he's running, why he's hiding, and he's reading the Neverending story. And he tells him, "Have you ever been Captain Nemo?" You know, but they always end, don't they? The Neverending story is not a book for you. But then he gets a phone call and he goes away and you see you see Bastion running away with the book, and you see that he's actually smiling because he must have done that on purpose, you know. And he basically tells him, "I'll bring him back your book," and so he ends up running to his school. What do we think about that scene with the store owner in question?
Well, it's a
Well,
typical of adults using reverse psychology to get them to take the book by telling them, "Oh, this book isn't for you. Don't look at it." You know, I'm trying to hide it, and then walks away to get a phone call. You know, there's no way that the kid. I knew the kid was gonna look. I didn't think he was gonna take it right away, but because I forgot, like I said, it's been a long time since I watched it. But yeah, of course the kid's gonna read it. You know, and he was, you know, gracious enough to leave a note saying, you know, I'll bring it back and everything.
Well, usually in these kinds of stories, these child-centric fantasy stories, there's usually like a mentor or wizard character, you know, sometimes literally a wizard, you know, like the Wizard of Oz, or, you know, like the librarian in the Pagemaster, if anyone remembers that, or you know, like this. You know, there's usually that kind of older, wiser character that kind of either is there for consultation or sets things in motion. And in this case, this character sets things in motion.
I love
But I
this.
think what you think you missed is when he first runs in here in the store and he's like, well, we don't have anything in here that would interest you. Nothing goes beep or buzz or whatever. We have square things. You know, they're called books. And then
Right.
you know, Bastion explains, I like books, and he tells them all the things that he has read. So then he starts smiling, because then I think then he's kind of like okay, this is really the right kid to give this book to, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, like
I-
even before that, like was when he first walks in the door, the guy just barks out, "We don't want any kids in here." You know, that just like he, it's sort of the "stay off my lawn," you know, sort of deal.
I love that
And
character.
it's also funny. He's like, "There's no video games in here." You know, like only kids are only interested in video games and not books at all.
It
Which
does
in
sadden me
'84
that
was
these.
a good guess with some people. You know.
It does sadden me these bookstores, these mom and pop type bookstores, don't exist as frequently as they used to. They still do, but they're rare.
Yeah.
And those are there. I could see like this guy being like the main character of Black Books. After he's gotten much older, he's slight and sadly less cynical than he is in Black Books. But still, or I could see even myself if this was like a movie store. It's like, this isn't your streaming, kid. This is DVD.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too. Like at first he was just curmudgeonly, is like, you know, we don't have anything for kids here. It's like, but I like books. It's like, oh, all right, cool. Let's talk.
Yeah, you got comic books. Was first said.
Yeah,
He's like, I got books. And he's like, not comic books, blah blah blah. No, real books. And then he started listing off everything. Quite impressive list.
Kind of reminded me of Christopher Lee's librarian character in Hugo, Martin Scorsese's Hugo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. So after that, he shows up at his high school, goes in and peeks on his class. He realizes that that he's not really being missed. So
well, he realizes that math they're having a test, which is like even worse than just regular math.
So he goes over to a door that evidently is in the school, and he goes and grabs a key, and we find out that there is an attic that looks like it hasn't been used in years of this school's, and he plops himself with a blanket and begins to read this book, and it tells him of a world called Fantasia. And
Not to interrupt, but an attic that looks like it hasn't been used, but yet he knew where the key was and he knew it existed. It went up there right away.
Yeah, he either had been there
Right.
before or yeah.
I love that attic.
I got the impression that this is his escape, that he probably does go there regularly, but then no
Yeah,
one
as
else
much-
really does.
Yeah,
much
yeah, he's
dust-
just not used to being there late at night with all the scary things that pop around.
Yeah, it's
As
quite.
much
It's
dust in that thing, it had to have not been used in years, which is strange considering, you'd think in the school this would be the storage space.
yeah, that's
Right.
quite the attic for what I assume is a public school, isn't it? You know, it's full
It-
of all kinds of shit that I doubt that. I don't know, maybe not.
Honestly, it kind of reminded me of a lot of high school anime because they always have those creepy old buildings and rooms that no one uses and all that kind of stuff. And you don't see that as much in American productions. I guess the fact that this was a German-based production, maybe they do weirder stuff in European schools than they do here.
It's very possible. But I mean, again, we're kind of, we're doing the adult thing where we kind of overthink it, but still, it's it is kind of funny to think about. And then the other thing that I thought about was okay, so they got candles there, it's getting all spooky, and so what? No one went looking for him, and he's a kid who can kind of go around unaccompanied, a lot more than you could nowadays.
Well, keep in mind, this was the 80s, and in the 80s, kids had a lot more free reign. And of course, as we've established, the father obviously wasn't
True.
looking for him afterwards. He couldn't be bothered.
Well, and the school obviously didn't know that he'd even shown up to school.
Yeah, they do definitely frown upon you showing up for school and not letting them know that you're in school. I did that once. I just skipped homeroom because it was boring, and they suspended me for 3 days for it. So they definitely frown upon that, even in the 80s.
But in any case, we begin to hear this tale told from him at first, but then we meet these three characters. That one being a rock biter, who is a character that is huge, and he rolls in on a steamroller bicycle. And he comes across two other characters, one being a night hob, and
Right.
the other, I believe he was called Teeny Weeny, or a Teeny Weeny.
Right.
For some reason, I called them Willy Wonka and the Hobgoblin.
Well, I mean, it is Deep Roy who I believe played the Oompa Loompas in the Tim Burton version, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Was that Deep Roy? I could have
Yeah.
sworn
Yeah.
it was.
It
Okay,
was.
Yeah.
good. I was making sure I got that right because the voice is, I think, dubbed in, but
I
yeah,
think you're right.
but visually, I was like, I swear that's
Yeah.
Deep Roy.
The Willy Wonka that I refuse to acknowledge. Sorry.
We do not recognize the sovereignty of.
Oh, it's
Well-
not that bad, guys. Come on.
If we come back to this theme in the future, we will cover Willy Wonka this month. I think if we come back to this theme, it's only fair that we hit that one.
I mean, I have seen it, and I mean, yikes.
Talk about unintentionally scary.
I don't know about unintentionally.
But in any case, the night hob rides a bat, and the teeny weeny rides a racing snail. But they kind of have this little moment where they kind of meet each other, and the first story or narrative is one that we get from the Rockbiter, in which that there is this lake in his land that It was once there, but now it is gone. But then again, gone is something. So he said, all of a sudden, nothing was there. And we get this whole story about this big calamity that's happening, called the Nothing, from each of their lands, and they're each on their way to what is called the Ivory Tower, which apparently is reigned or sovereigned by the childlike empress. So they each agree to go and continue their journey to the Ivory Tower. What do you think about these three characters here?
Oh, I like the Rockbiter. I tell you the truth, he always was a fun character to watch as a kid. He made those
Yeah.
rocks look tasty, and
Yeah.
but does anybody actually? As a kid, I had an easier time with this, but just conceptualizing the nothing, where he even says like a hole would be something. Nah, it was nothing, and I'm like, I can't even wrap my mind around, because none of us have seen nothing, because nothing, we've always looked at something, so it's just a concept that's even foreign to our
I think
minds. It
it's
almost hurts us to think of.
I think it's just like the hyperbolic time chamber in Dragon Ball Z, where it's just like a white void.
Yeah.
I
I
just
think it was
imagined
Black
something
Void
like
here,
that,
but-
and it was pretty
But-
easy.
Well,
But then again, that would be something, as Morla would say.
Right.
well, I think if I can interject, I think the fantasy stories tend to be more feeling based than, like, science fiction tends to exist more or less in the realm of like attempted logic or attempted speculation on what could exist or be possible. Fantasy stories do tend to revolve around feelings and emotions and that kind of thing. And and again, this one is so rooted in the idea of depression and loss and dealing with all those feelings. And when you're in that state, then it can feel like nothing. It can feel like there's an absence of something. Something was there and now it is gone. And the concept of nothing is something that is very, very foreign to the human mind, because we're still three-dimensional mammalian creatures, and we don't really have a concept of eternity, let alone nothing. We can only think in terms of some things, and but we can understand the feeling of nothing, or that something is missing. That we definitely know. And so when it is hard to visually represent nothing, but at the same time, I think the emotion of it is very, very palpable.
I was going to say that I like these three characters because they're all very flavorful and very memorable, and they're a great way to like get the exposition of what's happening to Fantasia kind of out of the way. Like they set up the story like perfectly, like they dump a lot of info on us, but it doesn't feel like an info dump. Like it's very organic.
Well, and they're just so visually interesting too, so
Exactly.
that helps a lot. And may I add that they had the whole super fast snail thing decades before DreamWorks' Turbo came out.
Yeah,
Right.
I love
And
it.
you had that nice little moment. You had that nice little moment where the Rockbiter is saying something like, "Why don't I just pick up the snail rider and carry him?" And he's like, "Oh, well, this is a racing snail. It goes fast." He still doesn't believe him. Then he takes off on the snail. Oh, it is a racing snail.
Well,
I thought that was
part I
fun.
really
Before-
like too, because I love the little racy snail, especially when he takes off like that.
That's a fun moment.
Well, and right after they leave, the Rockbiter actually stays back a moment, and that's when you get to see like the trees ripping, and he's like, "Oh no, it's the Nothing," and you can feel that dread that he's feeling because he's already seen it before. So he kind of like hurries on his way, but you get to see a sense of what the Nothing is before they get to the Ivory Tower, which I kind of like the bat here for a moment because he's so sleepy while he's flying. And his night hob is kind of like insulting towards him.
So, Dave, you've read the book.
Rockbiter to me was a cool character, but I kept thinking when he was eating the rocks, like, boy, is he a messy eater, like getting more on everyone else and almost killing them than actually getting in his mouth, you know.
So Dave, you've read the books, because these characters kind of play a minor role. Though one could say that the Rockbiter plays a little bit bigger role as it goes. Do they have a bigger role in the books?
Slightly. I mean, they go a little bit more into detail about their lands and stuff. You know, honestly, Michael End really has no argument towards this movie. It really follows the book really well. It's just there was something about the production he just didn't really like. So, I personally don't get why he had a personal vendetta against the movie, because I think it plays out really well according to what they had to work with from the book.
Well, and let's keep in mind, in defense of Tim Burton, Roald Dahl hated Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and I believe it was either his widow or his estate felt like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory followed the book closer. So, you know, the author and the adaptation that's beloved by one group, you know, they don't always match up.
Oh, yeah. Now, did anybody... Okay, as a kid, I don't know why I never caught this. Both times when Nighthawk was like, is he a nutcase? And I was like, huh? What's he saying? And then, you know, later on in adulthood, I was figuring it out. Yes. Is he a nutcase? Is like...
He said it twice. He said it twice. Once to the Rockbiter and once to Atreyu when he said that he was a warrior.
It's just like it's that inflection, the tone. It was hard to figure out what he was. I thought it was like some sort of language word that he was saying, but I didn't. But
no, he was just being comically insulting. What is your nutcase? It just sounds funny.
I mean, technically, nutcase is a language word because it is a word in a language. Although this time, not to jump too far ahead, but this time I was glad that I looked at the name written out. I was like, oh, that's what he said. It was a Moonchild was the... Yeah, that's what he was yelling that one time. Because, like, when I watched, I was like, "What did he say?" So I share that, but for a totally different scene.
Well, I remember not really hearing it when I was a kid, but we can get into that later. But they arrive at the Ivory Tower, and I guess they're peeking in through like one of the holes in the tower itself, and it looks like there is a multitude of people from the Land of Fantasia that have gathered at the Ivory Tower, all in mind for the same reason: to seek out the help of the childlike empress. And they are in wait of apparently the only person who can help them, which is a warrior by the name of Atreyu. And so when a boy, steps up to the plate, they're kind of like hey, we weren't looking for a boy. We're looking for the warrior, Atreyu. You don't look like him, you know. So what do you think about this whole gathering and the first time that we meet Atreyu?
Atreyu is also the name of a very okay band. So I can't help but think of that every time Atreyu's name is mentioned. Atreyu is a fine character.
They named themselves after him, of course.
Well, yeah.
The interesting So the name Atreyu, now that I guess in Bastian's imagination, he's modeled after a Native American boy on horseback and stuff. I always thought just the name Atreyu, just hearing it, sounds to me very Japanese. But I don't know if anyone else felt that way.
I could see that.
But it's
I
a
could
it's a
see that.
it's a good
but-
strong name though. It's a good warrior name.
Oh yeah.
Well, I
And
think
for me,
isn't it? I know I read what it actually meant, but I can't remember. That's where I thought you were going, Dane.
Well,
But
supplement it, please.
I'm going to see if I can find that real quick. I'll come back.
after the initial introductions of Atreyu and the fact that they didn't think he was the warrior in which they were looking for, he is tasked with being asked if he's willing to go on a quest. If he really is the Atreyu that they're looking for. And
per
he agrees.
IMDb, so take it with a grain of salt. An ancient word that means bold guardian. Yeah. So, good name for a warrior.
And he is given this necklace that is called the Oron, and it is supposed to protect him in times of need. So he is sent out on his quest without his weapons, and he ends up taking his horse Artax and goes on this journey. What do y'all think about this journey that he goes on, and ultimately where he ends up in this swamp area?
Montage. I did like the little part in the middle of that, and between where they do like stop by the nice stream, and they have that. I used to always have like something prepared to eat during that scene, because I always like to stop and take a break with them to eat when I was a kid. And but also it introduced that one of the characters that that's one of two things here that I could see being scary, one being more traumatic and one being more scary. And this is the more scary one, which is the creature of darkness that is hunting him. Is it Gamork? Was that Gamork?
Yeah, Gamork, the
Gamork.
giant wolf thing.
Like
And
a wolf bear thing. Yeah, that was a freaky looking thing.
Which
when this was submitted for Accidentally Scary, I was like, really? I mean, there's that one really sad scene, but I don't know what's scary in this movie. And then Gamork was introduced, and I was like, oh yeah, oh damn, wow, okay.
Which now I have to say that the actual creature is much scarier than his name would lead you to believe, because when you hear Gamork, you think of something from Dr. Seuss or something.
Yeah.
It's not a scary name. Like Man Wolf thing is a lot scarier sounding than Gamork. Gamork sounds like he should belong in Whoville.
Well, and yes, we do get the whole scene where we are told that at the same time that Atreyu went out on his journey, Gamork went out on his to help and serve the Nothing. Which we'll come back to because eventually things come to a head later on. But we get this scene of the swamp, which is the Swamp of Despair, if I remember correctly.
The Swamp of Sadness.
The Swamp of Sadness. And basically, Atreyu and his horse are tramping through this swamp, and then suddenly his horse, Artax, begins to sink and sink and sink, and he's basically pulling him out, but to no avail. And this is one of the sad scenes that I would say is one of the those that probably, if you were a kid, Honestly, this part really is sad. I know I cried the first time that
This
I
part's
saw Artex. It's
Yeah.
really
This
heart wrenching.
this part still messes a lot of people up. Like they just can't handle it. Like it's kind of surprising. But after I saw it again, and it was like, okay, I get it. This is still really sad. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
Like there are adults that can't handle this scene.
Yeah, which
as-
again, go ahead.
As an adult, the scene does not affect me as much as it did as a kid, mainly because Artex really, now that I think about it later on, Artex didn't have a hell of a lot of development. We saw Artex for a montage, they sat down to eat, then he dies. But still, as a kid, that can really mess with you even then, because I think kids can bond with a character even quicker than adults in a lot of ways.
Well, and that's kind of where I was going with it. I was like, he's a horse. What does he have to be sad about? It's not like, he was going to the glue factory or he had a broken leg and needed to be shot or any of the usual, like, convenient, deaths that they usually spring on horses. It wasn't like any of that. I mean, he's a horse. He seemed to be doing okay. But then again, kids movie number one, number two, I do like the idea that an animal can have sadness that we humans don't pick up on, and also that it can even succumb, that animals are even weak to something like that swamp, let alone what a human could go through.
Honestly, horses are the most feeling animals that you can probably ever imagine. So I can see, I personally, as an adult, understand that this animal probably has those feelings, and you cannot ignore the fact that animals do have feelings.
They do.
So,
The only animal that could possibly top it might be a dolphin, but obviously hard to wrangle them in a swamp as opposed to an ocean.
but shortly after he watches his horse perish, basically, he comes across what he has been searching for, the mound in which is called the Great Mound or
Shell
whatnot.
Mountain.
Shell Mountain. And it turns out that Shell Mountain is in fact the Great Morlaw, which is a really, really old, really, really big turtle. Or tortoise, probably just a turtle. But what do we think about this character?
Not that it matters.
He's a little grumpy.
Needs to use a damn Kleenex.
He's a very memorable character, and I think some people did find him creepy too, for whatever reason. Because I remember I saw somebody mentioning that they were afraid of the turtle, and it's like, really?
That is one big turtle. I mean, anything that large is going to be scary just by definition, but
And
I could think of scarier things, though. I understand that.
Keep in mind, this also is where you see the first breaking of the fourth wall, with
yes, we get the breaking of the fourth wall, which is the Bastion. He screams something, and they both hear him. And he's like, huh?
Like Bastion freaks out at the description of the turtle, and both the turtle and the turtle are like, what was that?
Starts to get a little Truman Show up in there.
It's kind of the first indicator that the line between fantasy and reality is different in this movie.
Yeah.
I think the first time I watched it, I thought the turtle was a little creepy too because of how it talked and how huge it was. I was just like, "Whoa, look at that turtle!" And then it sneezed and sent him flying, and I'm like, "Wow."
The turtle is a way of also spoking his feelings of despair. I mean, where he mentions, "Oh, well, you should ask the Southern Oracle." He's like, oh, how can I do that? It's like, you can't.
Yes, the
Just to show.
cheerful. The turtle was so cheerful and such a font of good warmth and feeling.
Well, nobody had visited him or her for so long that they started to talk to themselves. You know,
I actually, I guess, kind of slightly bit of personal information. I kind of empathize with that thing with the turtle, because I spent so much of my time alone, like growing up, that I actually did start to do that, and I still call myself we sometimes. Like I catch myself doing that a lot.
Yeah,
So that's
I
a
do
real
that.
thing that can happen.
I do that too, with like, let's do this, or we shouldn't do that. I think that's pretty common with people that have like a really
Goes a little
overactive
goes a little
imagination.
further than that with me,
Mm.
but I won't go into it.
Did anybody else notice the subtle mention to the nothing when he's like when he says, "You'll die, both of you." Die? That at least would be something.
Something.
And it's like I didn't think about it, but then later I was like, that is a subtle like jab at the concept of the nothing right there.
well, yeah, because when the nothing comes, it's not exactly death; it's just nothing. So, going forward with
Unlife.
going forward with that, he continues through the swamp until Atreyu basically like
He starts to give up
goes
too.
correct, and he starts to go unconscious, and that's when he ends up waking up next to a Lux dragon.
We're
named
missing a
Falcor.
pretty important part of the story for a second there. So he's starting to feel the pull of the swamp, and he's starting to go down too, like the horse did. Meanwhile, Gmork is actually pretty close to
Correct.
him, and he's almost caught him. And the dragon kind of comes down from nowhere and grabs him.
Yep.
At the last minute before
Oh, that's
Gmork's able to
luck.
snatch him. So, yeah, it's pretty lucky. Hence the luck dragon part.
And he
Kind
wakes.
interesting the design of the luck dragon here. How it does kind of evoke Chinese dragons, but not in the usual colorful sense. Just more in the sense that they're very, long, very horizontal, not all that bulky in the way that a lot of other kinds of dragons are. But yeah, not as colorful, but just pure white instead.
It's like a westernized Chinese dragon.
Oh, my favorite character in this whole series. I don't know what. I mean, as a kid, I loved Falcor. He was such a fun character.
I love Falcor too. I wanted one.
Falcor is a pretty.
Come and take me away to fantasy world and away from everything. Come on.
Falcor is a pretty metal sounding name, isn't it?
Well, yeah. And Alan Oppenheimer is the voice of Rockbiter, Falcor, Gmork, and one of the narrators in this story. Damn. So I give him credit for having a voice for all of those things. And it's really funny because in the second film, the school janitor or caretaker ends up being the voice of Falcor in the second one. So it's like, how the fuck could you not get the original guy who like voiced him? Come on.
Well, but the second one and the third one, they change actors twice for Bastian.
I still refuse to acknowledge the third one. But in any case, moving on, the character of Falcor is introduced to us. And Atreyu starts to walk away, and he's like, going somewhere. And
he doesn't realize Falcor's a good guy yet, yeah.
Correct.
He actually said leaving so soon.
Well, yeah, but in my mind, it's to me like that's what he's saying.
Well, then he
So
says something like about that he likes children, and he goes, "What, to eat them?"
For breakfast, you said for breakfast.
you know, I have an itch behind my left ear. Could you come over and scratch
This movie is so quotable.
So he does, and he basically tells him that he's taken him basically almost all the way to the to the Sphinx. It's like right around the corner, but he also says there's two other people that are willing to be his friends or wanting to be his friends. So we meet this husband and wife that live in this hole in a rock face, and they're very funny to each other. I think they're like one of the best husband and wife duos that I've ever seen in a fantasy film. The one, he's obviously an astronomer of some sort, and he's studied the Southern Oracle to such extent, and he's so old. He's almost senile, and she is just a lovable character. Where it's
They're like eccentric
what do y'all
elves.
think? Yes,
it's fun.
They remind me of Miracle Max and his wife. I swear that's where the majority of my
Goodbye, boys. Have fun
Yeah,
storming the
impression
castle.
Yeah, actually, it's pretty accurate.
But she is into making potions, and she ends up making a potion for Atreyu, and ends up sticking Falcor with some nourishments. But meanwhile, the male elf ends up telling him about the first two installments in the Southern Oracle, which is the first gate, where you have to believe in yourself, basically. Have to believe in your ability and believe in you, in order to get through. And it just so happens that there's a knight on a horse that it ends up trying to go through, and they watch him. What do y'all think about this whole process here?
This was one of the two parts of this film that creeped me out a lot as a kid. I don't know what it is, especially when you see the knight coming up, and he's all like, "Go on, scaredy cat," like this, and the guy gets blown away. It kept me on edge as a kid. Even now, looking at those things, the designs of the statues and so on, creeps me out.
Well, and of course, right after Atreyu sees this happen, he's like, "All right, I'm going to go do it," and then you're like, "Do you have to?" you know. And so he goes, and
he's trying to
looking.
stop him because he didn't tell him about the rest of it.
Correct, because the second one, the second part of it is a mirror, a wall of mirror, where I guess it shows you your true self. And honestly, like Dustin said, this movie is so quotable because most men, if they see their true selves, they run screaming.
You think you can do it? It would take a miracle.
But so he gets up to the gate, and he's walking, and you see the camera move from a gatekeeper to gatekeeper, and the eyes are shut, and then all of a sudden they start to slit open, and you almost think that Atreyu is not going to make it, but he makes it at the last moment. And so you hear the cheering of him, and he moves forward, and then this is this second piece is where you get the second piece of fourth wall breaking, because his true self, it shows a very good perpendicular showcase of showing Bastion as being his true self.
Yeah, freaks
And
Bastion out.
yeah, it freaks Bastion out, and it probably freaks the viewer out. What do y'all think?
I think it freaks Atreyu out too. Like Atreyu is Bastion, like in every functional sense, and I mean it makes sense because it's. I mean, I saw that and I was like, oh, I get it. So I wasn't like, confused or shocked or anything when I saw that.
I didn't understand it, but I also, again, the copy I had was a very ratty VHS tape, and it was so snowy and not the literal snow uh, that I couldn't tell what was going on through part of that part up until I was an adult and watched it later, and it was probably fine. I didn't quite understand it until then.
So after we saw that moment of realization that things are not so normal, he reaches the third part of the Southern Oracle, which is the Southern Oracle themselves, if I remember correctly. And they look exactly like the first gate, except they're all in blue, and it looks so beautiful, and sparkly. And they begin to speak to him and tell him that in order to save Fantasia, and if I haven't said spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen, we have definitely shown some spoilers along the way for this movie, but definitely check the movie out if you haven't seen it yet. We are told that the childlike empress must be named, and not by one of Fantasia, one from beyond the borders of Fantasia, an earthling child. I think those are the words. What do y'all think about? What did y'all think about that when you were told that?
Which interesting. Something that Ursula K. Le Guin's The Wizard of Earthsea books really talked about was the power of names and kind of understanding something and calling it by its right name, that sort of thing. And so when you name something, it becomes very powerful, and it becomes you take ownership of it when you name something, but it does take on a new kind of significance, and so one could interpret that as like you know Bastion having to kind of orient his thinking around his new reality, and by doing that he gives it a new name. And it's also a childlike empress, so it's childlike, like him, but also it's an empress, so it's female like his mother, so there's a lot of metaphorical kind of coming to grips with the death of his mother that's going on there. And the only way that you can overcome those kinds of feelings is by giving them a name.
And he's like, Atreyu is like, but how can I do this? I mean, how do I find an earthly child? How do I find the boundaries of Fantasia? And we get this moment where he's been flying with. He takes Belcor and he takes tells him, let's find the boundaries of Fantasia. And how do we do that? And he's like, well, with luck. And then they're in a storm and they get separated, and he finds himself in a part of Fantasia where everything seems to be broken, and he finds himself in front of Rockbiter once again.
Now, one thing that was left out is that you can see the Oracle crumbling as they're saying this, which you can tell that how high the stakes are. And again, that was the other thing about these statues that freaked me out as a child. I don't know why, but it did. But yeah, just the desperation of it all.
Well, yeah, the one thing they said before he went off on his way is that you must figure it out before the nothing takes us, which means that they'll just be nothing too, I mean, everything in Fantasia will be nothing. So ultimately, he finds himself kind of at the end of the Fantaverse, where things are crumbling, and he's actually never met the Rockbiter before, but he ends up showing up. He's sitting there, and this is the part that really screwed me up when I was a kid.
My friend Adam actually loves this speech that the Rockbiter gives here. It's his favorite.
It's a great speech, but it's so sad because he says these look like great big strong hands, don't they? And he goes into how he thought he had a grip on the Night Hob and the Teeny Weeny, and he just couldn't hold on to them long enough, and he knows that the nothing is on its way. And then he says again, these look like big strong hands, don't they? And it's just so sad. I mean, you can tell that he has been crying. I mean, if a rock shed tears, he was definitely in tears.
Well, and that's, I think,
If
the
you
whole.
look close enough, I think there are tears.
Well, and I think that's kind of the whole point of that speech there, that scene, is that no matter how big and strong you presumably are, that, death and despair and all that stuff can come for us all, and it doesn't really matter, if you're a big, strong person or a little person or a child or whatever you are. It can happen to all of us, and it does happen to all of us.
As Marla said, now death, that is something, isn't it? But in any case, after that, he ends up going into a cave where he notices that there are paintings of all of the journey that he's been on, all the way up until the painting of Gamork, where you see these eyes in the darkness, and that's when he meets Gamork, and Gamork pretty much tells him that Fantasia has no boundaries.
Gamork to you.
And I have been sent to kill the one that I lost in the swamp, the one they called Atreyu. Then come, Gamork, I am Atreyu. And he.
You know why Gamork is so upset?
Well, we're missing the really
There's no
cool.
community.
We're missing the really cool conversation that they have about like the nature of imagination and the nothing.
Yeah, the despair. I mean, that's really what it's about.
The fact that he even tells him about it is kind of unique, which tells you that Gamork, even though he is the evil one, he is able to hold a conversation and kind of pull back the layers of what truly Fantasia really is.
Well, that's usually what the evil ones in these kinds of stories do. Like the really good ones, they are usually the ones that are really intelligent and kind of pull the wool off of someone's eyes.
One thing I want to add too before I forget is I always like that there's a very slight subtle implication that Gamork was sent by the devil to like destroy mankind's imagination. Like, I was
Right.
sent by the one who wants to control, you know.
Well, I mean,
I always
he's
enjoyed that.
he's definitely a devil-like character, or at least
That's
he serves that role in the story. That's for sure.
that's one of the things that's interesting between that and a similarity that you see in Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time towards the end. Spoilers for any of you there, but there's a lot of that concept of, yes, they're going to destroy everything, but I will somehow, as an ally to this individual, remain, and I will have all the power that's left. In his case, he's thinking he's going to remain in order to help control those people that are left in reality, those people without imagination. And if you really look at it, Bastion's father is a good example of what is happening to humanity as it loses its imagination and its will.
Well, and ultimately, the devil in at least the Judeo-Christian tradition, the classical weapons of the devil are doubt, despair, hopelessness, all that kind of stuff. So it definitely fits that role.
So ultimately, there isn't really much of a battle because Atreyu actually picks up a sharp shard of what looks like rock and basically pierces his body to an extent where he's dead. And
Well, that's
there
one
is
of those things that's unfortunate. Like there's a lot about this movie that's so great in terms of like the design, the implementation of just the wonderment of the world and with the puppets and everything. That's a notable instance where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have the final battle. No, we cannot. I am but a puppet, and he stabs him once, and that's it.
Right. And
That's
also, I'd read that.
unfortunately just kind of a limitation of the time.
Yeah,
Well,
I liked
supposedly
that.
also the puppet was so heavy that they were deeply concerned about injuring Atreyu. He was injured. The actor was injured several times on this film, and they were concerned about further injury. So I'd read that they did that quick and got it over with because they were trying not to actually hurt the kid, which good looking out, I guess.
well, and shortly
Pancake
after.
Pancake Kid is not really a good recipe, I don't think.
No,
Right.
definitely
I
not.
will throw out that I appreciated the commentary about how Fantasia doesn't really have boundaries. The idea that it does interact with our world through the book. It's a nice concept. I feel like it was clunkily implemented personally, but it's a really cool idea. And I think Dane, I think you were the one earlier that mentioned the Pagemaster, which kind of also does a little bit of the same thing. It is something that I enjoy seeing from time to time in stories, and you do see it pop up here and there. And I wouldn't be surprised if this was an influence on later things like Pagemaster.
Yeah, Pagemaster is kind of like the creatively bankrupt version of this kind of thing, or
Right.
comparatively so.
Yeah.
The superior version is Muppet Babies.
Sure.
Oh, we're making fun of Muppet
Okay.
Babies now? Come on. Why do you keep trying to fight me?
In any case, after that, we get this moment where Falcor is still disoriented. He's trying to find Atreyu, and somewhere along the way, he lost the Orin, and so Falcor found the Orin, and then flew to where Atreyu was, and so once he picked him up, they went to find the ivory tower, or what was left of it, and they found it. And though crumbling, it was the childlike empress basically said that she knew all along exactly what was needed, and And he was like, well, how are we going to find an earthling child? Well, he's already been with us every step of the way. He was with you when you lost your horse. He was with you through every single thing. I mean, he's lived through everything that you have, you know. And then she's basically playing with Bastion. You have to give me a name. And Bastion in the real world is conflicted because he doesn't really know what is
What to
real and
make
what
of
isn't
this, yeah.
anymore. I mean, he's now caught up in this story, and he's confused as all hell. Because he didn't realize that he was part of the never-ending story. You know?
Yeah, man. Book's talking to me, man. Gotta go get help.
Yeah, any sane person would probably think, well, like, what the fuck, you know? So, but he finally is like, okay, I'll do it. And then he goes to a window and screams his mother's name. And that's when everything goes dark. And then you see a candle. And then you see the childlike empress in the room with them. And she's like, make a wish. That's how it happens. That's how it begins, you know? And so he makes a wish. And the next thing, you see him on Falkor. And he's traveling the land of Fantasia. What do y'all think about that whole?
That was a wonderful moment. That like at the end there, like what now? What do you want to do? Like the very first thing, ride the dragon.
Well, and then of course, Falkor is like, well, what do you want to do next? And so he whispers in his ear, and then he chuckles. And then the next thing you see is that you see the bullies, and then you see them look up in the sky, and they're like, "What the fuck is that?" And then people around there were saying, "Monster," you know. And he's going with Falkor. They're going like, "Arr!" And they're chasing the bullies to the same dumpster in which they made him jump in.
Oh, that was so cathartic. I love that ending.
Why was his mom's name Moonchild?
Because she took a lot of acid in the 60s. That's why.
Her parents.
Because I didn't know it was his mother's name. Because he named her Moonchild. That's not a typical name for a mother, but
right.
Well, and
unless
many
she did a lot of acid in the 60s.
And there were many people who didn't realize that was her name. You know, it wasn't until
I had no clue what the fuck he was saying.
Yeah, I had no idea until I saw subtitles what he was saying.
I had no idea until I looked it up, and actually, it was the actress who played the childlike empress who tweeted it, and it was a big tweet for many people because so many people had not known that Moonchild was in fact the mother's name.
Well, like I say, names have always been odd. I mean, shoot, if I could have it count for every Nevaeh or Absidy out there, which are very socially accepted names now, but in the 90s, those would be kind of looked at as like, huh? So it is as it is.
I think this film holds up to this day, and I think this is like, if I had to choose having films like on a list, this would be on it, because this film is like perfect. I know that it's got some corniness, and I know it's got some things that resonate with many people, but to me, this one is one to me that like stands alone and shows you what fantasy really is to me.
So, Dave, you were the one who selected this for Accidentally Scary. So, I got inquiring minds got to know what was it in this film that you felt was scary.
Well,
Uh,
I definitely think that there are many people who find that losing a loved one is scary. So that part is scary. Um, the fact that Atreyu lost his horse, that was a really scary moment. I mean, and to be honest, anytime that the rockbiter noticed that the nothing was taking like everything, and the fact his whole speech there, like when I was a kid, that part resonated with me in the sense where like it haunted me. You know, it really did. That moment haunted me because that's that last moment of despair when you know that you're going to be gone and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, and you've accepted it. That is a really scary moment. But now that we have reached the end of this, why don't we talk about production?
for the time, I think the production was really well done, and I love practical effects. And this film had amazing practical effects, even for today. I do think that the art of practical effects is sadly almost a lost art, which it's not entirely, but it feels like every day that goes by, it's more and more absent,
Yeah.
which is a shame.
Well, the practical effects definitely have an 80s charm to them. I will say that both this one and Return to Oz, which I would argue that Return to Oz's practical effects are better than this, but both of them have notable limitations of the time as well, not the least of which are the composite shots, which this one actually looks quite like Return to Oz has some composite shots that are pretty bad by today's standards, which again can't get too hard on it because it's what they had at the time. But I noticed these are particularly kind of egregious, like some of the flying scenes. It's like, yeah, Superman from 1978, cuts together better today. But again, you can't be too hard on it. It's an observation. But no, practicality wise, I like seeing the puppets. I like seeing, even if like they don't look entirely realistic, they have a charm to them that you know that can't be replicated with CGI, which just looks kind of soulless.
Oh, and the makeup. Let's not forget that too. Makeup was amazing in this.
Right. And I agree, I think, with what Dan was saying about there is a little bit of that kind of 80s. I mean, the 80s were like the time of the puppet based kind of fantasy film, thing. And they're a little goofy by today's standards, but it kind of in a good way for the most part. But I do agree, yes, there were some pretty rough composite shots that did not age well at all. And there were, but mostly otherwise, I thought the effects were, decent for the time.
What about you, Crow? What did you think about the production?
Yeah, I thought the production was pretty decent for its time. Like a lot of other 80s movies, like you guys said. Yeah, it was just pretty good production. I mean, the dragon was pretty cool, but to me, the dragon, I mean, I know it was a dragon, but the face looked like a dog to me. Looked like a dragon's body with a dog face.
I think that was intentional, yeah.
Yeah, which is really weird to mix a dog and a dragon, but
to me, it felt like kind of more like the Asian concept of dragons, like with the dog-ish face, but also like that sort of feather fur scale combo.
Yeah.
which, Western dragons, you tend to think of just more like armor and scales.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well-
Definitely to me, it seemed like it was a cross between a dragon and a dog.
Well, and some people have said that when Falcor is flying, he looks like a tampon.
I mean,
Who says that?
we did have a dragon and a donkey mate and have kids, so maybe
That's
there
true.
was a dog and a dragon and had Falcor. And Falcor is a badass name. I want to point
I was
out.
gonna say that's even more metal than Atreyu as a metal name.
Really
there are a
is.
lot of the there's some of the Japanese concepts, like in the games for Lunar, that have the kind of cat-based dragons that are very similar to that. So a dog-based is not that far off. Actually, almost a Chinese dragon in some cases like that.
Tammy,
Right.
if you could add something to add to the production, what would it be?
Well, I like Falcor. So I think that the mix, how they did that with him having like a dog face, even though he was a dragon, I think that was something that would relate to kids watching it, because all kids like puppy dogs, and I think that's what made like the kids really fall in love with Falcor. Um, I like I like how the effects are, they're not all CGI and stuff like you get nowadays. I like how it was done.
Okay. Now going to favorite scenes. Actually, let's go to. We did kind of touch on music, but what did y'all think
I
about?
like how he skipped me for that part.
Go ahead.
I don't think I have a whole lot I would change, except maybe Gmork's puppet form is a little puppety in some shots. Like, he seems like the least solid thing about the effects. So I would maybe just kind of spruce that prop up a little bit.
Well, and it's sad though, because he does have really scary eyes, and like he taps into like that very big bad wolf kind of archetype that a lot of children have for an animal like antagonist. But then you're right,
He still looks great. He's just a little stiff in some shots.
yeah, he's probably one of the more puppety looking
Well, I know
characters.
he's definitely animatronic.
Yeah, but especially when he gets stabbed just the one time and that's it. It's like, oh, gee, he really was a puppet, wasn't he?
I actually rather liked that, about how he's just so eager to attack and kill Atreyu that he makes a mistake and just gets impaled on that thing. Like, he's just not even paying attention.
Yeah, full of hubris.
I think he's like the least realistic looking one out of all of them.
I think I agree with that, yeah.
Yeah.
I did notice that when he was talking, his face did have expression while he was talking.
Right.
And his eyebrows moved, his eyes. I don't know what it was, but I did like the fact that we could see a little bit more of a personality in him while he was going through that whole Fantasia speech that he was giving. But
while he was talking, yes, he seemed very realistic then. I do have to say that he showed a lot when he was talking, but that's about it.
Yes. And he was pretty much there to just be the evil thing that was the opposing side of the nothing, and I think his end met his means, if you get my drift. So,
one random more thought I just wanted to throw out, because I just looked at the trivia again real quick, and I had remembered something I had forgotten to mention before, but on the idea of the dragons probably having sort of an Asian feel to them, I do think that was intentional, because I was reading that apparently Michael Ende, if he had his wish, supposedly, he had apparently wanted in his mind that this could be a film directed by Akira Kurosawa. And for one thing, I'm not sure that this really fits in with what I expect to see from Kurosawa, but I do find it interesting that supposedly he was thinking along those lines. So it definitely makes me think that he probably did have a strong decision. He probably made the intentional decision to make a more Asian style dragon for the story.
Okay.
That might explain the name Atreyu too.
It might.
I know that Tammy, you like the Lamal Neverending Story song, correct?
Yes. If you hear the song, you think of the movie evidently right away. So I think it goes with it very well. And I think it was done very well. But I do like all the other music in the background for the movie too. I think it fits.
What about the rest of you? I know that we some of us sort of mentioned it in the beginning.
Well, I mean, the themes itself, musically, this one is one that has a soundtrack that I could see myself listening to, not like on its own, but definitely in the background. It's got a lot of cool things. I mean, like the theme that's playing in the background as Artex is dying, the kind of whimsical theme when he's waking up with the Luck Dragon for the first time, or when they're eating lunch. It's just, I think that the music does a good job of reflecting the feelings, and it's one that could be overlooked really easily, but not one that should be over.
Okay.
I like
One
the
thing-
music in the background, like when a trio takes off and he's going across everywhere. That's a nice sounding theme in the background.
One thing that I think does need to be mentioned with the music, and I had not really been aware of this beforehand, but now I am, and I kind of was joking before about a Criterion edition, but I would like to see a proper collector's edition that really brings in some of the stuff that we want to see. And one thing would be something that gives you the option to watch the original German version, because apparently one of the big differences is that the score is completely different. Apparently the German version and the American version have completely different music. So I'm not sure. It probably would not be considered an improvement to people that grew up with the American one, but I'd be curious to hear what the difference is.
I do know that there is an extended version of this film that I know that there is several Japanese Blu-rays that are out there that have an extended version. I don't know whether it has it on the 30th anniversary Blu-ray, but
this is this is a very good target for Shout or Arrow. I could see either one of those companies handling this. Maybe even do the trilogy.
I don't want Shout to handle it.
Why not?
Just don't.
That's odd.
I just think Arrow would be a better option for it. That's all.
I'd like to see the trilogy. As much as I dislike the third film, I have a hard time exercising it from the set.
I actually have not seen the second or the third film, so I need to get on that.
I saw the second one. I did not actually know there was a third one.
Oh, it's probably better that you didn't. Second one was okay, but the third one was terrible.
Yeah.
I remember not minding the second one.
The second one was good. I thought it was good. So
Once you get by the actor changes, it's not so bad.
no, definitely not. And there's some recognizable characters from some other cool series in the second one. So, but
I don't like Falcor's voice in the second one.
well, that's because he's the caretaker of the school in the first one. But in any case, let us go to favorite scenes. So, Dustin, why don't you tell us what is your favorite scene or scenes from the Neverending Story?
I think it would have to be the conversation with Gmork. Like, I love that so much. Like, it's both like scary and like really interesting, and it lays out like some really fascinating concepts.
Okay, Brandon, if there was a favorite scene from the Neverending Story, what would it be?
Oddly enough, I'm going to say that my favorite is that lunch scene where they're breaking down, they're having lunch. It's probably the most intimate scene with the horse. If you're going to go on like the horse was, you're very close to the horse at the end, it's probably the best one to say that with. But also, it introduced Gmork as well, which those were, I like the contrast in the scene, and it's one not many people would think of.
Okay, Kroll, if there was a favorite scene from this film, what would it be?
It's hard to say. This I really like at the end when the kid's flying on the dragon, which leads into the other scene I wanted to make out is when he comes back to Earth and chases the bullies and into the dumpster and stuff and gets his they get their comeuppance and yeah, really those two scenes together are probably my favorite.
Okay, how about you, Dane? If there was a favorite scene from the Neverending Story, what would it be?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean, I like the. Honestly, the one that's leaping to mind is the death of Artax, just because it has a lot of weight to it, and it lets you. It happens early enough to let you know that nobody's really safe in this. Not even the horse.
Okay,
It's a very iconic scene too. It's what people remember from this movie.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a memorable scene. Tammy, if there was a favorite scene from this particular film, what would it be?
Well, I definitely like when Bastion first goes into the bookstore. I like that whole scene when he's telling them, no, um, we don't sell it, things that go beep and beep and beep here. We sell things, square things, books. And they go into that whole little thing. He's like, oh, I like books. I've read this. I think that's really neat. I just like how the bookkeeper's like, oh, okay, you know, this kid actually has got, you know, down to earth. He likes these things. And then, of course, I love the scene where Falcor goes after all the bullies. That's great.
Okay, Jake, if there was a favorite scene from this film, what would it be?
Well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and say one thing that I somehow forgot to say earlier, but I think it needs to be said, even though I'm sure some people will disagree with me. Barrett Oliver's performance as Bastion sucked. He pissed me off. I did not like his performance one bit. So, having said that, on to the positive. I'm going to agree with Tammy that the scene in the bookshop was pretty great. I loved the bookshop owner. He amused me very much. And I'm probably also going to say the scene where the Rockbiter meets the Nighthawk and Teeny Weeny. I like the Rockbiter a lot, and I just feel like his introduction was a pretty great scene.
And I myself, I'm going to have to say my favorite scene, even though it's a really sad scene. I think it's the whole Rockbiter scene where he's like
He's
these
lamenting.
look like great
Right.
big strong hands, don't they?
Yeah, I was going to.
And even though Falcor is a great character, I love him. I do really think that Rockbiter is a great character to show, that whole hopelessness of the nothing, because you see him seeing what the nothing is before he joins his friends to Fantasia, and then you hear exactly what he had to go through, and see, he watched his friends get taken by the nothing, and he's just got this whole hopelessness and dread about him, and he's kind of just the end of all hope character, and to me, it goes to his character, and I just get a kick out of it. Even though it's a sad scene, it's something that sticks to me and haunts me to this very day. And even though our text is a memorable scene, that scene to me is more memorable. And that's just me. So in any case, is there anything else that anyone wanted to say about the film before we do our outros?
I want a luck dragon.
Yeah.
A real one, not a stuffed animal.
Yes, I want a real one. Definitely.
Well, everybody wants a Lady Luck too, so
I want the Neko version.
But
I don't want no
in any
Lady Luck. I
case-
want the Luck Dragon.
So who wants to go first?
Yeah, David, you can have a rock biter, and I'll have a luck dragon. Okay.
Fine, whatever.
Okay.
I'm going to go with you, Dustin. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I have a YouTube channel called The Crypt of Horrors where I used to somewhat frequently upload videos where I collect horror movie stuff. And I still intend to keep doing that. I just haven't had the collecting spirit for a while. I have a bunch of stuff that's ready to go live. I just need to, finish editing like a dozen videos. So subscribe to my channel and incentivize me to get cracking on that.
Okay.
I have an Instagram called The Crypt of Horrors as well, which I've been posting there with some more frequency. And you can also find me on Twitter as Cryptaxis.
Very
Pretty
cool.
active there, so yeah, come hang out.
Okay. Going over to Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I am Dane Kyle, an indie filmmaker out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and I also have a YouTube channel called Dangerous Arts, DANEJUROUS. Dangerous Arts, where I, in October of 2021, I did a series called Oztober, where I reviewed 31 different Oz-related film and TV adaptations, and I'm currently working on April in Wonderland, set to debut in April 2022. So, trying to make some progress in that as much as possible, and trying to make it bigger and better. So stay tuned for that. And some people from here will be involved in it.
Very cool. Going over to you, Carl, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? Carl, you're muted.
Sorry, I didn't hear you say my name. Well, I'm disabled, so I don't work, but I watch movies, I watch TV shows, read books, play video games, keep myself busy. I'm on this podcast as well. There's another podcast on Sundays, so really enjoy doing them and love talking about movies. So it's really fun to be on these shows.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for coming on. It's
Thank
been
you for having me.
a pleasure for having you on. Going over to you, Tammy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, basically, I haven't been with this group or the other one that Kroll mentioned that long, but I enjoy watching the movies and listening to everybody else's ideas and putting my own in. Um, don't have the background of everybody else, but it's been a lot of fun so far and very interesting. And I'm David's fiance, by the way.
Well, and she also enjoys spending time with her 1972 Grand Prix during the summers. So definitely catch her baby Pre at one of the car shows one of these summers. So going over to you, Jake, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm Jake. I live in Central Virginia, where I am an anime, movie, television, book, general media fan. I don't get to put as much time in nowadays as I would like, but still make time to watch some stuff to come hang out with these fine folks, and it's always fun to talk about things, including ones where we can have varieties of viewpoints. So it's always good times. Of course, one of the things causing the time crunch is that I do have a native plant nursery that I co-founded a year ago, and it's been taking up a fair bit of time, but things are slowly moving along. And then, of course, the last couple days we've been dealing with a very sudden snowstorm that has made things interesting here.
Where supposedly, if I remember correctly, has kept some people for 20 hours stuck on the highway, eh?
Ooh, luckily that was not me. I do not envy those folks, but best of luck to them, definitely. And of course, I do try when possible to put my to be involved in various fun projects as well in the film enjoyment and filmmaking community. I've got a couple of projects that I've backed through Kickstarter, and of course I am the co-host of SeptumSin versus the World, where we talk about physical media and do all kinds of other fun stuff from time to time, including an anime discussion each month, which I believe this month we'll be looking at the Count of Monte Cristo, so that'd be good times.
Gankutsuo?
Indeed.
That's a good
Indeed. Going over to Brandon, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do?
Oh, yes, I'm SeptumSin, a SeptumSin versus the World. We love physical media here. We do a variety of pickup videos. And this coming year, we are expanding. We're going to try and start a new series this month on the Bad Ben film series. Very much looking forward to that. And I'm going to be working on some reviews for this year. I'm going to be changing it up to make it more of an analysis of the films. So that's something to look forward to as well. Of course, at the moment, we're still kind of working through, but we do our best. And I'll come back at the end for what's up next.
Alrighty, and my name is David Straggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore, so thank you for coming with me on this journey. It's been a pleasure with all of you. We've had a lot of growth, and I think we enjoy talking with each other, and going through each and every one of these movies, even though we have different viewpoints and different sides of things. It's been fun. So I guess I moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where I also podcast under such title. But also I also go on and show you exactly what I pick up over several months periods of times to show you what kinds of things are out there to pick up, and also do my own video reviews from time to time. So definitely go over to that channel and give it a like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully you've enjoyed our film journey so far, and hopefully we continue to surprise you and bring you something cool to just go out and check the films out yourselves, because you're going to have your own opinions and your own thoughts on these films, and just give them a watch. And thank you everyone for coming, and hopefully you've enjoyed. So and hopefully you can find yourself as part of the never-ending story as we have, because there's probably someone reading about us at this point in time, exactly what we're going to be doing next. So Brandon, why don't you tell us exactly what we're doing next?
Well, I guess we get to see what scares Dane in one of these mundane, regular films as we move over to The Secret of Nim next week.
Which, to be fair, it doesn't scare me, but it did, I'm sure, scare a lot of kids when it came out, because it is a very dark film, but a damn good one.
Precisely. So join us next week as we go into The Secret of Nim.
All right, everyone.